All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're going to go ahead and get started with this regular meeting of the Isla Vista Community Services District. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'd like to announce that the meeting is being recorded. And Jonathan, can you call the roll?
Director Brandt?
Here.
Director Flaherty?
Here.
Director Bertrand?
Here.
Director Freeman?
Here.
Director Aguilar?
Here.
Director Topliff?
Here.
Director Deschler?
Here.
All right. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Chumash people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place, Anascoyo, the land that Isla Vista sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. With that, we're going to move to the consent agenda. Do any directors have items they wish to pull? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Made by Topliff, seconded by Flaherty. Is there any public comment on the motion? All right, seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Director Brandt?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Bertrand?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes.
Deschler?
Yes.
Topliff?
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously. And with that, we're going to move to the next item, the public comment period. This is the time for any member of the public to speak on any matter that is not on today's agenda. So if you have a public comment for something not on today's agenda, please hit the raise hand button or indicate in the chat and we will call on you. Last call, general public comment. Seeing none, we'll close that period and we'll move to our discussion and action items. And the first item on the agenda is the Ivcsd Pop-Up Halloween Programming Grant. And I just want to thank a number of directors who've been very engaged in helping to envision what a safe and healthy Halloween would look like, and hand it over to Jonathan to introduce the programming grant item.
Great. Thank you. Let me get my screen shared. Is that seeable? Readable? Okay. So yes, this is it's a great proposal I think we've got today. It came together over the last week while we were working on it. The idea here is to put together a grant program. We don't have the specifics from any of the groups looking to have something yet. And we didn't think that we were going to hold up the process because we couldn't have those specific budgets and plans in time. So we thought what would be best is for the board to approve a grant program that we open up to the community, to the groups we've spoken with, which will go more into depth, as well as other organizations. And also, as part of this grant program, for the events that we are funding, to do very widespread outreach to make sure all households in Isla Vista are aware of what's going on, what kinds of events are happening that weekend, and also health and safety information. So this is right now, most of the discussion has been with the Isla Vista Food Co-op. Our board members, our small group, our 3 board members and our staff have been meeting with them a couple times already and meeting again this Thursday. And the plan working with them is to have a costume contest on their patio. And the St. George Youth Center has recently, this memo is now out of date because they just sent us a newer update where they're thinking of doing a pumpkin carving event at their center, open to the public. So and then possibly bringing the teens to the other event right after. So there's two specific events that we have organizations in the community interested in. They, we're going to have them submit, their grant budget once that's more finalized in the coming days. And it's going to, all of it's going to have to be within the scope that we've put in here, the $10,000. It'll all add up to that or less. And we'll also work with these groups. If a group wants to have the grant, we would enter into a facility use agreement with them that would turn their facility essentially into a community facility temporarily that we're programming. And it's not gonna, the district staff is gonna do the work in helping coordinate, reviewing the grant applications, working with the organizations, putting on events, supporting them. But the organizations are going to take the lead on making these events happen with our support. And we're going to take a lot of the lead on promotion by doing the door hanger that's going to go to every household. So just a last recap is the criteria we're looking for that we've been discussing is open to the public, positive, safe, and healthy environment, draws attendees away from concentrations of private parties, and family friendly. The budget we have available, we have very large budgets in this area available, 55,000 in community festivals and 60,000 in special projects. And we're proposing a budget of 10,000 for the programming grants that will be split up amongst the different groups that submit a proposal, and then 3,000 collectively for outreach. And this is a facility use agreement example that Ross, our legal counsel, drew up. That's a simple, almost two-pager, that one-page double side, that is what helps make this all happen. Essentially, it's the legal basis for having these events in community facilities around the district. And this is the plan. So we have I didn't maybe give the details. The co-op event is going to be on Saturday, 10:30, and the St. George Youth Center event will be that day as well. Associated Students Hunt the Loop is on Sunday, which we've supported in the past. And other organizations are also having events, but these are the ones that we have been talking about supporting through this grant program in some way. But it's going to be out there. We have had other interest from other businesses, but no solid plans. So I'm not going to announce anything yet, but this now makes this open to all program. But we have some very strong prospects moving forward in the planning actively, so that we're looking forward to working with those partners. Yeah, that's the proposal, and want to see if our board members who've been working on this want to say anything as well.
Any directors have anything to add on to the presentation? Director Bertrand, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Well, yeah, I'm really excited about this. What I'd like to say is the collaboration's been really strong with our partner businesses and organizations, especially with the co-op. We went to them first knowing that they do a lot with the community and they have a very strong commitment to building community, and that's really been apparent throughout our partnership on this. We're really excited to have something that is a small step towards our goal of reimagining what Halloween and what a festival weekend is like in Isla Vista. Additionally, with St. George Youth Center, we know that their mission is aligned with ours. They're serving a population that often has not received enough attention on these weekends. So overall, it's coming together really well. We have been moving fast. Our work group has been in touch in one way or another pretty much every day since our last meeting. Some days talking much more than others, but the point being that we have been spending a lot of attention on this. And I want to thank staff for putting together this package as a grant, which was Director Brandt's idea, seeing it as a grant program rather than just the district conducting the programming. And last, I'll just mention that after this and after our meeting with the organizations and businesses on Thursday, I think we really enter into the get the word out stage as far as community members. Many of us remember that last year's costume contest at our virtual Halloween program was very popular. And I think we can make it even better when it's in person this year and tied towards bringing people to the downtown area on the Saturday night. So just thanks to staff and excited for us to continue to work on this.
Thank you, Director Bertrand. Director Flaherty, go ahead.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to say that I'm super excited about this grant process. I thought it was a great idea by Spencer, and I really think that it's in alignment with our conversations that we had 2 weeks ago about Halloween. And it's been really exciting seeing all of the community conversations. So many different organizations are really hoping to plan in advance for Halloween so that it can be safe and enjoyed by all residents. And so I'm super excited to support this. And I also want to thank staff for all their hard work. I know it's been a really fast process getting it all together, but I'm really proud of where we are right now.
Thank you for that, Director Flaherty. I want to add thanks to one other person. I want to thank our Community Engagement Director, Sydney Kassler. I know that she has been working very closely with our local news media, and we did receive some great coverage, I think, after our last board discussion about this item that actually helped alert some of the businesses in our local community that this was something that was under consideration, and really, I think, spiked some interest that was very positive and helped form the direction of this proposed grant program. So very glad to see that there is interest. I think we all knew that interest was there in creating some sort of programming for people to attend in a weekend that is historically very locked down. And to do it in a way that promotes safety and health, I think is just so important and really in line with one of our core goals as a board of directors. So thank you for staff for helping put all of this together. All right, now we'll open it up for questions and comments too, and I'll go to Director Freeman.
So over the years, we seem to have continually pushed the boundary on what it is that we consider to be our purview with relation to both community facilities and recreation. And I found myself often getting on board with things in some cases. I mean, in some cases, not being able to get behind them. And we've gone from looking at running events where we provide the public safety aspects to looking at where we provide events that themselves feel like a service, such as like a daycare. That's fairly recently we did that. And we've looked at this idea of running an event inside of our facilities where it's clear that this is a facility that we are always operating out of, such as Halloween last year. This here now is kind of combining aspects of this, where we are doing something that is ostensibly a more general purpose grant to an external party to do a recreation at something that is, I guess now, like these pop-up community facilities, like we were doing with the things that I felt at least tentatively able to get on board with, because we were like arguing that it was a service, things like that daycare. And so this to me just really feels like it's kind of out of scope. It just looks like us doing recreation. I mean, at this point, if you're willing to just claim that anywhere in the community is something that we can just have a little agreement you sign, and now we can do recreation in that's our district doing recreation, which is not separately from the fact that we don't directly have that power. That's the thing that we're not supposed to do. We're not supposed to supplant the Isla Vista Recreation and Park District in what they've been doing. The idea wasn't that we were supposed to be a second government that people are paying in order to get similar services to the existing governments. And so I'm voting no on this, barring somebody coming up with a very interesting explanation for why it's okay for us to do this on both those grounds, and that it just feels organizationally weird for us to be going into that without at least like a letter attached to this from the Parks District about their excitement about the fact that we're working on this, something that shows that there's like this kind of good faith connection, even with respect to how the districts see each other. I appreciate that I'm probably in a minority of one on this, but that is my feelings. So.
Thank you, Director Freeman. I'm going to go to Director Deschler and then Director Bertrand.
Thank you. I just had a couple questions. I wanted to ask a couple questions that maybe are for Ross to answer, but I wanted to focus on the money because these are public funds. And so I wanted to find out if this part of this process gives people an overview or constraints on how these funds can be used, what they can and cannot be used for, and if we know what those constraints are. And then I also wanted to ask a question about the facilities use agreement. Is it the case that by giving an entity funds that there has to be a facilities use agreement, or is this facilities use agreement if we are partnering with an entity and it's being held on their property? So I'm just trying to understand when do we use the facilities use agreement. And and then just to go back, I am concerned about, I'm not concerned, I have questions about the use of public funds and accountability and making sure that the funding is going to things that we want that to go to, and that it's kind of along the lines of what Jay said, that it's within our scope that this funding goes to. And then to Jay, I would just say, I don't see these grants as at all dissimilar to what we did this summer with giving funds to the St. George youth projects to do the camp program. I mean, we are, the board, the district has part of its mission is to do these types of programs. And so by giving funds, we've given funds to other entities to do similar type of work that the district can't do on its own. So I don't see the difference between what we've already done, but I'm sure you do. So that's all. Those are my two questions.
Jonathan, Jonathan or Ross, do you want to take the question?
Yeah, I think the questions were for Ross, the facility use agreement.
Sure, and those are good questions. I'll start with the facilities use agreements. If an outside group is going to come and use the Isla Vista Community Center, we have a template facility use agreement for that. That is another agency, another government agency, another group, or individuals come in and they want to use a district facility. There's a use agreement for that. If the district is going to use some other location that's not the community room or the community center on a temporary basis to program it in a way that is substantially similar to how it would be programmed in one of the district's physical locations, but for some reason it is either not able to be held there in one of those district facilities, or it's more advantageous to providing the community service to have it at a different location, then we've been taking the position that it's effectively a temporary facility, and there's a different facility use agreement that governs that situation, because those are two different use cases with two different types of property. In the past, when the board has directed programming of funds on a grant basis, we have grant agreements that cover how that money is to be spent, and that provides the metrics and the guidance for, as you say, how public money can be spent, because it is taxpayer dollars. So I think that hopefully clarifies the different use cases for someone coming in and using a district facility, and the district is operating a location outside of district facilities in a way that is consistent with providing a community service in a way that is substantially similar to a community facility, and then how grant agreements are handled. So I think that answers those questions, but if anybody else has any more, obviously I'm standing by to answer.
Okay, so just to follow up, so I guess that makes sense. I guess it was just confusing to have the facilities use agreement as part of this Halloween grant item, because I don't think the two are related, right? The Halloween grant program is a program whereby people would be applying for pop-up funds to do events. The temporary use agreement, the facilities agreement, that's something separate, because that's not being proposed to use with the Halloween grant program. Is that right?
No, it is going to be used because we would have this agreement with the co-op up for their patio, for example.
Okay,
This is one where there's two
Okay.
different kinds. One is where a group is letting us use their facility, and another is where we are letting a group use our facility. So this is one where another group is letting us use their facility. And so that's why we said it's part of the grant program where it helps us say a justification that this is a community facility temporarily that we're programming.
okay. So the Ivy Food Co-op is a different, will be a different event than say St. George Youth Projects. We're not going to be entering into an agreement with them because they're going to be using their own facilities. So is that correct?
Yes, I think their facility is more of a maybe commonly known community facility. We might want to enter in an agreement with them anyways. But the co-op patio is a private commercial space, so that's one.
Okay, I got it.
Not a community facility,
I
but
got
we're
it.
going to
Okay.
be using it like the community room. And it's it's COVID too. That's outside. Ours is very small indoors, so that's what Ross is saying. It's substantially similar. So it's as if we're doing our event there.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to Director Bertrand and then Director Freeman.
Thank you. And I appreciated Director Dessler's questions. I think that helps bring some clarity to what it is that we are deciding. And I want to go back to Director Freeman's previous points, which I know we have different views on the community facility power that both of us have held strong to, and mine is pretty expansive. But when I think about what we formed this district for, and when I think back to the campaign for Measure E to create the district, Measure R to fund the district, Measure F at first, in all of those campaigns, and even on the campaign literature, when we were going to the voters, we were talking about how do we conduct programming during Halloween and Deltopia to make things better. So I really do think that this is central to our mission, to what the voters created us and have funded us to do. I don't think that we are stepping on any other district's toes, because what we're proposing to do here hasn't been done. And I also don't think that it's our responsibility to go to other districts to ask them to do things first. I think we are well within our scope here. But most importantly, we're working to make things safer. We're working to support our business area. We're working to change the negative image of Isla Vista Halloween and create something very positive. And this is just a small first step with this first year of in-person pop-up events, second year of district Halloween programming. But I think we're moving in the right direction.
Thank you for that, Director Bertrand. Director Freeman.
So I'm going to respond to just it's nearly not try to bring up anything particularly new. So I'm going to respond to some of the points we made. First, actually the couple from Ethan and then to Kirsten. So with respect to what people chose to campaign for with relation to the construction of our district, I mean, that's something that happened before our district happened. And to the extent to which somebody on our board feels personally responsible for having told someone in the community that our district could end up doing something, I don't really feel like that's really defines what our district should then end up doing. I will say, as somebody who is part of the AB3 process from the very first meeting of the AB3 process, that separating the powers of what the IVRPD would do from what the Ivcsd would do was the promise that I gave to the people that I had talked to. But not only that, is what we coded into the law. And I worked carefully with Darcel in order to construct the wording that went through multiple draft rounds. And I've told this story before of like the last minute when the lawyers at the state were making those changes. And she was like calling me like, are you okay with the following changes? Like we were attempting to construct a system for this government that would make it clear what we were supposed to do and what IVRPD was supposed to do. And so when I look at things like recreation, I see that as being something that IVRPD is supposed to do. And when I look at the powers that we were actually given, I look at those as things that we do. And to the extent to which we kind of stretch the definition of our powers in order to allow us to start moving into IVRPD territory, I think that goes beyond then just the parts of the law that we had where we specified the sets of powers, but goes into the idea of what it is that we supplant. And so then this idea of like, we're proposing something to do that hasn't been done. Okay, I sort of appreciate that, but has anyone checked? From like a LAFCO perspective, something that I also care deeply about. The idea is that these districts are all supposed to be doing things with non-overlapping boundaries. And so I'm always concerned that if we find ourselves in this weird position where we're starting to look like, oh, you're spending a lot of your money in a way that's just, isn't that what this overlapping district is supposed to do? It ends up causing us a problem when we start trying to make arguments about what it is that, and the success that we have versus, and separately, standalone, what other things in the community are doing. To address a couple of Kirsten's points now, for what it's worth, that the decision in the summer with relation to the Ivy Youth projects, et cetera, I mean, if you remember, I was quite conflicted on that. And actually, I kind of catalyzed one of the conversations that led to one of them getting punted back and then brought back 2 weeks later, or maybe it's a special meeting, but regardless, come at the next meeting for us to look at it in a different light with a different explanation. I felt sort of okay with the idea when we were describing it in a framework that did not make it about recreation, where recreation was something that was kind of a tack on because we were providing a daycare facility for certain and things like that. I still feel conflicted about that decision. Like, I still look back at it and think, did I make the right call there? Should I have voted no on that? But that was sitting further in that gray area, and we keep kind of moving the goalposts, I feel, with respect to what it is that we're okay with. And then I just want to, one thing about looking at this, the last thing, looking at this facilities use agreement here, the clarification and maybe some of the take issue, but I think this is what I think is the idea here. The reason why the facilities use agreement that we're setting up here is connected with the grant is because if we were just giving a grant for recreation, that would not even be in our powers. But if we instead have a facilities use agreement with them, now they're a community facility. Now that they're a community facility, we can argue that, well, part of operating a community facility might be to have programming at the facility. Otherwise, why would you, what are you going to do at a facility if you don't have anything that happens there? And then that's how we can start to try to indirectly connect the dots to claim that we can do recreation in the community with these grants because it's actually a facility. And so we can't separate out the grant program from the community facility, as awkward as I feel it might seem, because to me it is awkward, because that's actually the only basis that we have for being able to do this power at this time in this way for this type of thing. So I'm still voting no. I might be in the minority of one, but it's cool. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Director Freeman. I'll add a couple of thoughts. I appreciate this debate every time we have it, and it does feel like we have it quite frequently. So I think we've hashed it out, pretty well up to this point. But I really do want to add something really important to this, which is that this continues to be a strong community desire for there to be programming during Halloween and Deltopia and these large events in order to try and divert that energy that we know exists away from activities that are not as safe towards activities that are safer, and especially in this case, activities that are family friendly. And, with respect to the questions about supplantation, I just don't think that you can supplant a service that doesn't exist right now. And that's really what this type of a program is doing. It doesn't exist, and it's bringing something new into the fold. And I think it goes more than any campaign literature. I think this is in the ballot language for Measure R that everyone voted for. It was to operate community facilities and events, and I think that we are on extremely solid footing from what our legal counsel has told us. We have routinely had this discussion at the board, and I think had a desire to move in a direction that provides this type of programming and activities. And I'm very thankful to the community for sharing those desires, because I know it's something that we've heard a lot of over the last number of years, and I'm very hopeful that the results of this grant program will be something that's really great for our community and that helps keep this weekend safe and healthy. And I'm excited to continue to support it. And I want to, again, just thank our staff for your work that you've done putting this together, and you as well, legal counsel, for drafting up the facility use agreement.
President Brand, if I can add one thing.
Go ahead, Council.
I want to make sure that it's clear for both the directors and for members of the public from a legal standpoint. As I say many times, I advise the board on matters of legality. I don't advise the board on matters of policy. It is up to all of you as elected and appointed officials to determine with your votes on what the policies should be for the district. So this is not a policy critique. This is not a comment to persuade any director, Director Freeman, or any other director one way or the other, but it is to make sure that the legal analysis is clear and to highlight, I think, an area of confusion that arises because of an overlap between the authorizing statute for Isla Vista Community Services District and the statute that authorizes the Isla Vista Recreation and Park District, because they're actually two separate parts of the law. So Ivcsd is a community services district with its own provision in the government code, which falls under the community services district law. So all of its powers are specifically enumerated in 61-250 of the government code. There are other inherent powers and enumerated powers that, if they don't conflict with what is set forth in 61-250, also empower the district under the general community services district law, and that's in 61-100 and the other provisions of the CSD law. And one of the ones I've mentioned in the past is what's called the incidental power, the fact that, or the necessary and proper power, that inherent in the ability of government agencies to carry out their functions. They are able to do all things necessary and proper to do whatever it is that they're empowered to do. So for example, in 61-250, community services agreements, community service facilities, some of those are not really specified in what you can do and what you can't do. So it falls back to, well, you have the general power to contract. So in carrying out the powers in 61-250, the district has the inherent ability to enter into contracts to do the various things set forth in 61-250. And the one we're talking about is what we kind of colloquially call the community service or community facility power. And that states acquire, construct, improve, maintain, and operate community facilities. And then there is an example list, but it's not a limiting list. It says including but not limited to community centers, libraries, theaters, museums, cultural facilities, and childcare facilities. That's an illustrative list of the types of facilities that the district, Ivcsd, can acquire, construct, improve, maintain, and operate as community facilities, but it's not an exhaustive list. Hence, that's where the idea of a temporary facility use originates. It's not specific, but it is there. And my legal analysis is that based on the specific powers in 61-250 and the general powers that are inherent to community services district under the community services district law, that these temporary facilities are able to be managed and operated consistent with the district's power. Now, I want to make sure that you have that in mind. Acquire, construct, improve, maintain, and operate community facilities, including but not limited to community centers, libraries, theaters, museums, cultural facilities, and childcare facilities. Because the Isla Vista Rec and Park District is organized under the Public Resources Code. And in 5780.1, they define what recreation is. Recreation means any voluntary activity which contributes to the education, entertainment, or cultural, mental, moral, or physical development of the individual, group, or community that attends, observes, or participates. Recreation includes, but is not limited to, any activity in the fields of art, athletics, drama, habitat conservation, handicrafts, literature, music, nature study, open space conservation, science, sports, and any formal or informal play that includes these activities. There is an overlap between what Ivcsd is empowered to do and what the Rec and Park District is empowered to do. it's right there inherent in, it's spelled out in subsection G of 5780.1 of the Public Resources Code. So ultimately it comes down to not so much from a legal standpoint, community facilities power, it really comes down to the analysis of, is there a supplanting, is there a replacement of a service that's being provided already by the Rec and Park District in this case, but in the case of LAFCO, they're looking at spheres of influence and the provision of services that are duplicative or in some way not efficient, because they're trying to minimize the use of taxpayer dollars going to different agencies providing the same service to the same people. So in looking at supplanting, and I put this in a memorandum last year in November, in October, we're looking at the municipal services review. The operative phrase is supplanting, which is replacing. So my analysis is that if the board wants to provide these types of programs that are supplemental to programs that are being provided by Isla Vista Rec and Park District, then that is consistent with 61250, which says thou shalt not supplant. That does not mean that they cannot be overlapping, because by the authorizing statutes for both districts, there is a shared component with this idea of recreation, because it overlaps with cultural facilities. It overlaps with drama. It overlaps in some important ways. And so really, I think when the directors are looking at these types of service models, these types of programs, whether or not what you want to do or how you want to do it is up to the board. But there is a lot of space, shared space, in providing these specific types of services that is consistent between both the Public Resources Code for the Rec and Park District, excuse me, and 61250 of the Government Code for the Ivcsd. So my charge is to see that these programs do not supplant a service being provided for by the Rec and Park District. My interpretation of supplanting is they have to have a program. They have to have these substantially similar or the same programs in existence and operating in order for the risk of supplanting to occur. I'll give you an example and then I'll close out my comment. If the board was considering using part of the open space area behind the Isla Vista Community Center as an open space or park, I think that runs the risk of supplanting, because that is clearly something that the Rec and Park District does, that it is empowered to do, and that it provides throughout Isla Vista. I don't believe that from a legal standpoint, the programs that are being considered for funding under this grant with the facility use agreement, whether it be on the district's property or on a pop-up basis, it is close to that line of supplanting. So again, legal analysis, not policy. I wanted to provide that clarification to the extent it's helpful for the board and certainly for the public to understand that this isn't this is a policy debate. It's not a legality question. Thank you, President Brandt.
Thank you for that, Council. I appreciate your clarification and explanation on the legal side of this. So I'd like to open it up for public comment now. Do any members of the public have comments that they'd like to make on this item? I'm not seeing any. I do see a comment that the public appreciates Council's analysis. And I do see a hand from Gina. Go ahead, Gina.
Hey, I just wanted to say I also really appreciate what your legal counsel just explained about supplementing rather than replacing functions. I think that was a really good point, and I think that is what kind of swayed me the most, and I would appreciate if you took that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Gina. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak on this? All right. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Any other comments, or are we ready for a motion? Director Bertrand?
Happy to make a motion, but I see Director Topliff just unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to?
I was also going to make a motion, so I'll defer to you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I will move approval of staff recommendations.
Second.
There's been a motion made by Bertrand and seconded by Topliff. Any other discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Director Brandt,
Yes.
Director Flaherty,
Yes.
Director Bertrand,
Yes.
Director Aguilar,
Yes.
Director Freeman,
No.
Director Topliff,
Yes.
Director Deschler.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thanks everyone for that discussion, and I'm very excited about the future of Halloween in Isla Vista. I see a hand from Director Bertrand. Go ahead.
Well, yes, Spencer, I want to just emphasize what you just said. I know we took a different turn in this last conversation than we anticipated. Nonetheless, an important conversation to have, and something that hopefully in the future will help us just cut to the chase with our policy debates. But I really do think that was important for us to have that discussion. But most importantly, for the task at hand, this is a great enhancement for what's offered during Halloween. I think our community is going to be safer for it, and it's going to be fun too. So looking forward to it.
Thank you for those comments, Director Bertrand. So next, we're going to move to item 4.2, discussion of interim policies for the Isla Community Center and room reservation. I'll hand it over to Jonathan.
Great, thank you. Let me choose. Okay. All right, so the goal of this agenda item is to get your direction, your preferences over these many topics. The recommendation is to just direct us to do all the work that follows up your discussion on these different topics, and it is for an interim period of October through December 2021. So I do want to stress that we're talking about interim policies, and it is exciting though. So this has been our number one goal as a district for a long time, to reopen the Isla Vista Community Center. We now have a use agreement for the Isla Vista Community Center, but we don't have staff, and the building is still missing many features that we think are necessary, such as a floor or acoustics. However, there's still use for the building, and there is still the Isla Vista Community Room, which we are starting to reopen use of. But it has not, the Isla Vista Community Room hasn't really been used at this point since August 2019, since it had a mold issue that went right into COVID, or maybe there was a small gap. So it's been a long time since either of these facilities have been used. So it's also good to have a refresher. I attached at the bottom of this memo the existing policies we had for the Isla Vista Community Room, which we passed in 2017, in ancient history at this point, before Measure R. And like I said, we are hiring staff right now. We're in a recruitment process for a community center director who would be a dedicated person to operate the buildings, but that's not something that we have right now. So just, I think I summarized this essentially at this point, but what we're looking for from the board is direction on various policy areas. Use of space priorities. This is the main one. What kinds of uses, user groups to prioritize, what degree of use that's the appetite is for October through December. We can talk beyond it. Feel free to share your thoughts beyond, but we really want to look at this period right now. The reason being, I think I forgot this one piece, is in December we'll have the new staff. We'll reconstitute our community advisory board, which has been dormant since March 2020. And we want to empower them, which is what our resolution 20 or 19 dash, I'm not forgetting the number, but we did empower this entity, this committee, essentially a district committee, to take these actions, but we need to take action in the interim right now as a board while we get that group back together and we have staff for it. So use priorities in this fall period is one area of direction. COVID-19. So some other similar facilities in the area have done a vaccine mandate. Some have, vaccine or negative test requirement. I think that's actually what most have done. So if we want to do that, it's obviously possible, but it wouldn't be something that we can do very quickly, but it is possible to do. Insurance requirements. This is a very long one. This is a very long consideration. I'll say right now, we don't have any insurance requirements for use of our space. We don't actually have any sort of formal agreement for any use of our space. It's an email to the general manager or previously to the staff, and there'd be an acknowledgement of policies for the community room. But the community center never, we never really got going before COVID started to have any formal agreements in place. Remember, we really had 2 months actually of the community center before COVID. So looking at insurance requirements is one area, and the scale of it, this is very dense. It's gonna, be its own discussion, but looking at, do we want to have insurance for different risk events? Like an art class might be different than a dance party, whereas a wedding versus a financial literacy class. These are all different kinds of uses, and we might want to apply different levels. We're not going to have a lot of uses. I think that's why we said the first thing to discuss is the use priorities. If we say we don't want to have most classes of events, then it really limits the discussion for insurance requirements in this interim period, because we might not have a lot of events that need insurance, or maybe there's a couple that do. So again, this is just the interim period, but we're putting all the ideas on paper of where this can all go. Fees is another area I wanted to mention. Right now, we actually are charging a fee. We've never charged fees, but we maintained the county decision to charge fees to a user because we wanted to just maintain status quo from county operations until, in this 2-week period, until we could consider this. But right now we are charging the county's all-day rate to a user who gets, a half-day rental of the space. And that was a decision County General Services made, that we decided just to keep status quo until we had our direction. Next is finally Halloween. Obviously, another big point of discussion in this fall period, where we want to see the use of the space. If any, during Halloween, district council's recommending that this is not something to do, but there could be other things that could be done. Maybe having medical providers at the center during Halloween weekend. So that's these are some of the policy considerations. We felt that this was enough for today. Even, I'm sure there's more, and if you have other ideas of what you want to consider, please bring them up. But in terms of our timeline, this is, I think I reiterated this already, but this is just a very temporary period. We just want to be able to have something to go off of to operate the space during this time, when we, again, don't have dedicated staff like we used to have too, and where the space is unfinished and the community room is finished. So that's fully usable. And we don't have our advisory board. So we're trying to make an interim plan, and in December through spring of next year, we will be on a new track. We'll revise what we've done now to, interim 2.0, I guess. And then they'll be starting work on a third generation of policies and procedures based on actual real use and experimentation. So that's our memo or report. Would love to hear from the board. We can maybe do questions, and then we can go through each of the individual policy questions. Might be easy to do it like one at a time. We did kind of try to order them in the way that they would affect each other. So that might be a way that we could do this. So yeah, but I'd love to take any questions on this first, because I know this is a lot, and it is a huge discussion to have, and it is happening fast, but it is the discussion we need to have as we start to operate this new venture.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. Questions from members of the board? I see one from Director Deschler. Go ahead.
I have a couple questions. If you could just explain a little bit the relationship between the Isla Vista Community Center Advisory Board and the new position that's going to be hired, and then how that advisory board interacts with you, the general manager, Jonathan, and also the board. Who sets policy for the use of the Ivy Community Center? Is it the advisory board? Because if it's the advisory board, then I would say that that's the advisory board's job, and we can save ourselves some time. But if it's this board that is setting policy for 2 months, and then it's the advisory board that will then come on and make policy, then that's kind of weird. So I'm just trying to understand the different rules of the different groups.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, the Community Advisory Board is something that we, the board of directors created. So it's totally empowered by our board of directors, and it's delegated some roles. It doesn't have final say. Final say is always with the board of directors, unless you delegate that, but that wasn't done here. The relationship it has with me is I staff it just like I help staff the other committees, our policy committee and our finance committee, help set up the meetings. We're going to be building towards a new relationship now compared to what we had before, where the community center director staff wasn't part of our organization. Technically, it was a grant to Isla Vista Youth Project, so there was a weird way it was all set up, and it was difficult. But I think with now the community center directors being our staff member, and this being a body that we've created, we also appoint the members. Some of the members are the agency that we've designated to have a seat chooses, and we just ratify it. But the other seats, like the open positions, like nonprofit spot, business spot, we appoint them. So it's a board that and we have one member on it, and Spencer has been the representative of the Community Advisory Board. It hasn't been active. I think more than half the members are not in their roles anymore. So we couldn't have a quorum even of that board at this point. And so we're going to work towards that. But that's not going to be done fast enough to start having them, we're going to need to bring them back online, reorient them, get them going. But at the same time, we're getting a lot of requests for use of the space now. And we don't have current guidance on the space use and policies. And we didn't really in 2020, we had just started. I mean, we had just signed the lease, same lease we just signed 2 months before COVID. So we're getting a head start on ourselves from the past at this point. We maybe should have done it this quick before, but now we're doing it because until we have our advisory board going, we are getting a significant amount of requests that we need to be able to balance and respond to. And so the advisory boards really, I think I answered all your questions, but maybe one last thing: the relationship. It is advisory. I mean, it has a few different roles. I think I was sharing my screen, but I wasn't. So let me just share it right now. I have its mission statement right here for what it does. So it helps provide guidance to our board on issues pertaining to the management and organization of the community center and community room, on the issues of funding sources and funding, fundraising, technical assistance for the operation and management of the Ivy Community Center, assessment of programs and their impact, to be public advocates for the community center, to help advise on the hiring process, which we're doing informally. Like the hiring selection committee that I'm using for this position is going to mirror who might be on the advisory board, but the group is just not formally operating right now. advise on potential revisions to the mission, program, and composition, carry out any other roles delegated by the board. So yes, if we had in a normal time, if we hadn't had the interruption from COVID, we would just have this board take it on, but this board just needs to be rebuilt, and that's going to take a significant amount of work to do, and it's not going to be done before the next reservations come in. So if the board just wants to say, hey, we don't want to do anything until our community advisory board's in place, I mean, that is an option. You can just say totally nothing, or we might say just these few things, or we can say everything. Those are the different kinds of options. I think what I put in here was, let's try to focus on our established partners who've had events in the community center, whose organizations are experienced having events. So we had UCSB Black Studies Department have an event. They actually have used the community center in the past. So that's like an example of a group that we could work with another UCSB department who's had an event in the past at the community center, potentially like curate a few events if they even want to do them. You know, it's also, there might not be an appetite. I think there is. Or we can keep our open reservation system like it is now, which is, you know, status quo from before, where it's just, you know, book the center as we get it. But again, with that, managing the keys and everything, managing keys is already becoming tricky, and we only have a few users. And you know, balancing, you know, we have an automated process, and it's not that hard, but it is. I mean, users have a lot of questions and you know, demands as they use a space like this for the first time. So yeah, so that's my report. I think I spoke for a lot now.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. Director Topliff.
Well, I think it's very exciting that we're taking this role over, and I know there's a lot of pent-up demand to use the community center. So I am in favor of allowing it to be used as much as we can. And a lot of that has to do with our capacity. So obviously there are limitations there. And I think that that's kind of a staffing evaluation of the effort that's going to be needed and the systems that are going to be needed to have in place, and just what your capacity is and how much you can do. So I think we need to look to you to give us that feedback. And you probably want to be conservative starting, because you don't get overwhelmed and create problems. And then I know that back in my day in Isla Vista was kind of the start of the insurance, you know, mess that got thrown at everything and cramped everybody's style and ruined stuff and stopped things dead in the tracks. And so I'm just wondering, is it possible for us to carry insurance on the place that covers events that happen there, so that this is not a bunch of individuals scrambling to get insurance every time they want to do something? You know, it would be, I think it would be wonderful if we could figure out a way to make the whole insurance thing not a huge burden, not a major barrier for use of the facilities. And then another thing, I think that when you are evaluating different groups who want to use a space, and especially if there's competition for the same time slot, it's very helpful to have our own values to fall back on and have that be kind of something to weigh again. And I think that we have very good articulated values, and it would be good to keep that as part of this process. And I think that's all I have to say right now.
Thank you. Just to respond on the insurance and on a couple other points, I like what you said about the values. That's a really good way to frame it. And Ross put in the chat something to me I didn't mention, is that we want to judge reservations on use, not content. So there's types of use versus like, what is the content? So we wouldn't care what musical act you're bringing. It's a musical act, though. That's a type of use versus what kind of class, also what kind of class you're teaching. And And in terms of insurance, so I definitely hear you. And I think, we went insurance free for a long time, and it did make it very easy for people to engage with the community room. But it is a small space and more of a meeting room. I think there is a role for insurance here, but yeah, I want to pass it over to Ross. If you want to go over this, you wrote most of this insurance section. But I do think that we should have some sort of model where it's not a burden. But there are some groups and some uses that might need insurance. If you're having a very packed event in there, big operation, that might need insurance. If you're having a smaller thing, you might not. One thing I put in here was maybe we can negotiate a master agreement with UCSB to cover all of their groups, because we already have signed that agreement at one point in the past for use. So that might be something UCSB is open to, and that'll take care of some significant part of the potential users. But then also it's something the board wants to decide is what scale of users. I mean, do we want to accept reservations from private individuals versus community organizations that are formal nonprofits? I think we want to be open as possible, but maybe we might have different requirements for each, or based on the use or based on the type of user. So I think we can make it flexible and not confusing, but also work for what we need depending on like the risk level. So I don't know, Ross, if you want to explain more.
Yeah, I think that's a good overview, Jonathan. I want to emphasize the policies should be focusing on uses. Since we're a government agency, we cannot be making decisions based on the content or the purpose for which people are gathering and assembling. It's a First Amendment concern. So we don't want it to be perceived that we are regulating the speech of or the conduct of the people who are there because the district doesn't like the message that they're sending or the reason why that they're congregating. So that's not happening, and that's not what we're asking for. We're talking about intensity of use. Some uses are going to be more intensive than others based on a variety of factors. And so the policy questions around insurance, I think that the board in the past has made very clear that part of its policy goal is to encourage broad accessibility to different types of groups, to folks of different means, different socioeconomic statuses, and to make sure that there is a premium place on accessibility to residents and in many cases kids. And so that type of policy direction in the past has guided us towards some of the decisions that have been made and implemented. So with community spaces, you really got two things you're trying to watch out for. And sometimes this is best accomplished with having an insurance requirement. Sometimes that's accomplished by using the district's own insurance coverage, which it has. And other times it's about shifting responsibility, and sometimes it's about having like a security deposit. The two broad areas of liability you're looking for is protecting the public's asset, which is the property. So when people come up and ding the walls or scratch at the floors or break the microphone or AV system, there needs to be a mechanism by which the user is being held responsible for the damage. Think of it in the same terms as a security deposit for a lease agreement when you're entering into a landlord, a tenant landlord agreement to rent an apartment. If you break stuff, you bought it, kind of a thing. And because underlying that is that it's the public's property. So the public's property needs to be reasonably protected, which is why, again, it's based on the intensity of the use. If you're having an art class, or if you're having like a purple easel art and wine event, or if you're having a student group that has a certain intensity of use, that is most likely going to be lower than something like a band venue, which is going to be different than maybe having some type of a theater in the round outside, using inside and outside space. So there are all kinds of examples, and I mean, there's really no practical limit on it, just what your imagination is and how it fits into 61-250 of the government code. But there, the issue is protecting the public's asset, the public's property. The other part of that, which is not completely distinct and shares some of the same concerns, is protecting the district from harm. And that is about people who use the facility and then get hurt. They slip, they fall, or they claim that there's insufficient accessibility, that they need an accommodation based on a recognized disability, or any other number of ways that public agencies get sued when something doesn't happen the right way, or somebody ends up claiming harm or injury. So again, sometimes that's best accomplished through an insurance requirement. Sometimes it's a security deposit. Sometimes it's a waiver or indemnity provision. And I think that in the broad policy stroke that the board has taken previously of encouraging the greatest amount of accessibility to the largest swath of potential members of the public in the community, we want to put as much of the complexity basically behind the curtain so that the public doesn't have to struggle through things. And that's where we're coming up with this notion of basically a rough continuum of coverage, from a full insurance requirement. They have to have their own policy that names the district as an additional insured because they're having a 150-person wedding, versus a situation where you have a Zumba class, where in that dance class, you're more worried about wear and tear on the floor, but you're also concerned about people coming in and using the facility and tripping and falling. So in that situation, the damage to the property is covered by a security deposit, and they get it back when the class is over. Coupled with an indemnity provision that says you're using the property in the condition that it's being presented to you. And if somebody in your class slips and falls, you're going to indemnify the district. And, that is kind of a halfway measure. And then in other instances, the use is so light. It's a financial literacy class, as Jonathan mentioned. Maybe just a simple, acknowledgement or nothing. And ultimately, it comes down to making sure that the board's broader policy of wanting to provide the greatest amount of access to the largest segments of the community as possible also matches up with the board's risk tolerance. And that's really what this comes down to: identifying broad risk categories and then putting the necessary legal framework in place in a manner that is accessible to the public, but it's got to cover certain basic legal coverage issues depending upon that use case. So I'll give an example, and then I'll close out my comment. For the facility use agreement for groups coming in and using the community center, the whole idea was to have it as simple and straightforward as possible, have it one page if possible, have it understandable, and then have it translated into Spanish, the other dominant language. That way, the users coming in don't have to run out and get a lawyer. They don't have to stumble over complex legalese. And if English is not their native language, then they are not being shut out for lack of having a readable, legally binding, translated agreement in Spanish so that they can understand it and engage with the district for their own purpose. So we're taking the broader policy stroke and putting it through the filter of establishing a continuum for risk tolerance so that we can put in place the legal framework to offer protection for those two kind of coexisting interests of protecting the property of the people and also protecting the district from liability.
Thank you for that, Council. I think that's very helpful as we try to conceptualize this. Do any other directors have questions? Excellent. Okay. I'd like to hear from the public about any thoughts that they might have. So I'll open up public comment on this item of policies and procedures for usage of the community center. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? I see a hand from Rodney Gould. Go ahead, Rodney.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I had a few comments. One, just regarding the $350 rental fee that's there right now, that perhaps you would have a sliding scale based on the number of people that you have at your event. And along with that, the damage and cleaning deposits could also be a sliding scale based on the number of people. And one thing is, if you determined what type of events you wanted to have liability insurance for coverage that they had to provide, you could possibly make it across the board, and then for smaller events, they could come and ask the board for an exemption. I don't know that you can use exemption in the public thing, but basically the board would be deciding, actively to take on the risk of that event. So a painting class or, one of the educational classes or something, the board would be able to assume that risk if they so desired. And then, being the public agency, it is equal access. And I like what Ross was saying that, you can't determine, what's being said, but intensity of use is really the thing. And that could be controlled by the capacity limits, I think. But anyway, those were just my comments. I thought $350 a day is kind of high, unless you're going to include all the, cleaning and I mean, I don't know what's included with the daily rental. Do you have somebody there monitoring the event? Is that included in that $350? Or is it just the space and then, but you're taking on the cleaning, or are they expected to clean it? I would assume they're expected to do some cleaning at the end of their event, but anyway, just some thoughts.
Can I respond to maybe explain what this 350 is a little more?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, the 350, yeah, it is a rate that the county set, and that is something that we can do, is just use what another government agency set until we want to decide what we do. The county decided to charge this user rate. We need to investigate more on the conditions. They didn't charge other users rates, just this one. They are a private organization, so not a public agency like some of the other users. So I need to look at that more. But that is another one of the policy considerations, maybe not written out as explicitly here, but maybe that is something we consider. Rates for residents, rates for private organizations, rates for non-residents. That could, and I think for a fact this group is a private group, and I don't think they're residents. And that could be the county's calculation there, whereas they didn't charge others. But again, it's been 10 days since we took the building, and we were told the first day you have this user who's already been scheduled. So we took it as is, and we need to figure it out. But it includes just the building rental. That 350 is the all-day rate, and that's they're getting it in the evening, half the day essentially. But yeah, it's the county's all-day rate. Doesn't come with staff attendance or cleaning. There's no cleaning service or anything right now. It's just all-inclusive rate, I guess.
Thank you for that, Jonathan, and thank you, Rodney, for your comments. Appreciate it. Next, we're going to go to Mark, to be followed by Gina.
Hey, thanks, everyone. Yeah, I guess I'll echo Rodney's comments that 350 does seem high, but kind of hearing the nuance that Jonathan brought, that's just kind of what the county said. I do think it would be interesting to have different rates on various scales for different organizations, 501c3s versus 501c4s, people who live in the community versus people who don't, individuals. I'm also like worried, or not like worried, but I also keep what's on my mind too is about the amount of use. I wouldn't want anyone to I don't know how to say this, quote unquote, hog the community room. And so maybe having individuals not using it more than once every 6 months, or organizations not using it more than once a week. I don't know what the specifics of that should be, but that's something I worry about, is just if there's one organization that, has deemed it really affordable for them, or really, purposive for them, that excludes, other uses or other organizations from a diversity of options. So yeah. And then I just want to second, it's something that we kind of breezed over quickly, but yeah, whoever mentioned the idea of getting UCSB to potentially ensure all UCSB affiliated organizations and individuals, if that could even include faculty for Jeffrey's Jazz Coffee Club. I forgot what that was called, but when there was a professor who came and has their jazz club. I would love for that option to be pursued, because I think UCSB would be, I think they're smart to be amicable to that. I don't know if they will be amicable to that. Anyways, that's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mark. Next, we're going to go to Gina. Go ahead.
Hey there. So I wanted to comment that I think I like what y'all were saying in the beginning about it being as least restrictive as possible. I'm in several different community groups that are not nonprofits, not student groups, and don't have that official documentation. And it would be really nice to have a space that has the flexibility that allows groups like that to come and use the space. There's really nothing else like that locally that I've ever heard of that allows community groups and individuals to rent space that isn't for a wedding. And usually wedding venues are really expensive. But anyway, I think in terms of insurance, I've tried to do events before unrelated to Isla Vista that the insurance requirements have been really tricky. For example, getting a food truck to come, it's been the university requires you to jump through hoops to get even the most basic food vendor to come to campus. And it just completely ruins your ability to host events that people are interested in. So I appreciate sentiments that it should be as loose as possible with just allowing as many groups as possible to use the space for as cheaply as possible. I really appreciate that sentiment. And sorry, my roommate's cooking next to me. And that I think it would be better if you started off loose, and then if something happened later on where you needed to make it more restrictive or more expensive, you could always add those precautions later. But for now, it would be nice to use the space as quickly as possible for as cheaply as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, Gina. Are there any other comments from members of the public? I see a hand again from Mark. Something else to add?
Sorry, yeah, just a quick comment. Someone previously mentioned the idea of an organization coming to the board and requesting some sort of exception. I just wanted to actually push back against that idea, that I think it's a little bit onerous to the board that every time that there needs to be an exception made, that there would be that be granted. I think that might be a lot on the board. So that was the one thing I forgot to mention in my previous comments. Thank you for allowing the extra time.
Thank you for that comment, Mark. Are there any other comments from members of the public? All right, I'm not seeing any, so we'll bring it back to the board. And before we embark on more discussion, I just want to mention that I think something that's going to be really crucial, both for us as board members as we talk about this, and I think for our staff as we begin allowing reservations in the space, is to really make clear what staff mentioned at the top of the presentation, is that these policies are meant to be temporary policies for the goal of allowing for use in the space during this interim time period as we transition to becoming the operators of this building. And I also want to point out even further down the line, once we are in that phase, I believe it's referred to in the memo as it's the timeline December to spring, that we have, while it seems like there's a lot of things to figure out, we have a pretty good list of recommendations from the Legacy Works report that was prepared for the purpose of guiding us through this process of opening the community center. And one of the things that I think is really crucially mentioned in that report is the need to allow for an experimentation phase for us to figure out what works and what doesn't. And I think it's just going to be really crucial for that to be integral to the branding of everything we do with the community center, to really make clear and set clear expectations for our user base, that's sort of the phase that we're in. And eventually there will be a day once we figure out all of these things and we have more regular users, we have more regular programs, and there will come a time when those policies will likely be adjusted. So I just think that that's really crucial for us to think about as we move forward. So what I'm wondering, as we continue through the process, if there's something that I think would be helpful, with respect to the things that Ross and Jonathan have brought up regarding insurance, regarding fees, regarding intensity of use, is to when we want to make decisions about those things, come back to the board with a sort of matrix that includes the continuum of intensity of uses and also includes, I would like to see a model, as was mentioned by staff, that is categorizes users into residents and non-residents. And residents, I think, also includes groups of people, whether they are nonprofits, whether they are sort of not official groups, but just collectives of residents that can self-attest to the fact that they are doing work in the community. And I think it'll be important for us to really treat these two different sources of users differently, because I see the attained goal of having a community center in Isla Vista as it's just going to be really crucial for us to make sure that that serves our residents that live here, and that is something that is a primary objective. So I say that just to start off the conversation, but I know that aside from these sort of longer term decisions, we also have some important short term decisions to make tonight. So I think, Jonathan, you wanted to start off with the use of space priorities.
Yeah. So in that section, what we're thinking is keeping the major events that happen in the next couple months to be a few high impact programs with established users and partners, and having some degree of public reservation, but having it, I think, like Director Topliff said, based on what we think is doable at any time. Some events, I don't need to be there the entire time. If they're short to some, I might need to, just judging on the intensity of use. I think, yeah, this interim time, if the board's okay with it, I mean, my judgment of what seems to be an intense or less intense use, and then trying to make sure we've got some of our established partners looking at doing something themselves. Like we already had, the one which I heard was a very well received event at the patio. So yeah, that's my thoughts here on the use of space priorities in this fall is cultivate a few with our established partners, keep it open to reservation, but use judgment on intensity of use to allow or not allow use, because we also want to keep in mind that the floor is not there, the acoustics are not there. It might not be wise to approve something that might go wrong because of those things, or that we can't accommodate them. So
okay, discussion. I see a hand from Director Deschler. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so I was the point of contact for the Welcome Back Black Study students, and I'm laughing because, oh my Lord, it took so much of my time, and it was all around the insurance. So I think having some kind of master agreement would be awesome, but it definitely took a lot of time. Jonathan, I don't think it took your time because I was working with the county, but there was, it was a really big, I could see it being a very big barrier to planning an event. So yeah, I would just, I really liked what Carrie said about the intensity of use and also focusing on residents and trying to not make insurance a really big barrier for people, because I think it's not just organizations. It's, as somebody said, to have collective groups of people that want to get together, that's a real important function of the community center. I am concerned about the safety of the space, and I trust that Ross is going to make sure that whatever agreement that is crafted makes the district is very well protected. I like the idea of having a matrix. I think, Spencer, you said about, are you a resident? Are you doing work in the community? And maybe different fee levels for private entities or out of the area, because people who live in the district are already essentially paying for this service. So I could see, that maybe private entities subsidize the space a little bit. What are some of the other things I came up? Oh, the only thing I just wanted to say, and this is to Jonathan. We love Jonathan. Jonathan takes on a lot of work and he has a hard time saying no. And what I just worry about with Jonathan is that even in this interim, that just a few events can really be too much. And I experienced that when I was doing this event with Jeffrey, is that I thought it would be a very little thing, and it was not a very little thing. It was cumbersome. It was time consuming. It was making sure we had people pick up the garbage. It was making sure things were clean. Are there bathrooms? There was a lot of back and forth. And so I just don't want us to underestimate the amount of work in this next 6 to 9 weeks that it's going to place on our existing staff, who are already doing enormous things, completely understaffed. So I would just say, I guess my hope is that we can be conservative in the accommodations and the yeses that we say to the community. I know there's a lot of pent up demand, and that's important, but it's also a long game. And I think it's important that we have the mechanisms in place to really run a good program. And I think having a new director is important. Having the community board constituted is important. Having this board put together policies and procedures and insurance requirements is important. So I would just hope that in the next, several months that we are very conservative and our yeses, to make sure that, Jonathan's hair stays dark and not gray. and that we get somebody good on board who can really help guide discussion. I hope that as this new person comes on board, they will also look to other community centers around our community to get some best practices going forward. So I think there's a lot of really cool, exciting things happening with this. I just hope that we don't rush to provide services that we just can't really do well right now.
Thank you for that comment, Director Deschler. Director Freeman.
Here. We're talking about a rather small period of time before we have a person who's dedicated to actually work on this. And so I feel like biting off more than we can chew during that time period isn't really helping anybody. Actually, sorry, my phone just said low battery and it popped up a thing that took my camera away. It isn't really helping anything, and will end up making it more difficult to get any of the other things that we're trying to get done. Soon we will have that dedicated person, and we will be able to make certain that Jonathan isn't overloaded. We'll be able to, with that person in place, be working on all these issues so that they're up to speed on everything that's happened. I see no point in going overboard right now. And on that standpoint, I do have some feedback on the insurance topic, although I imagine that in the near future this is not quite as relevant. But my point being that, like, almost hesitate here on this thought process, but even though we are trying to, apparently that is explicitly one of the things you want feedback on right now is this insurance topic. So it almost feels more like a long-term topic than a short-term topic. So I had been involved in running events in the parks a while back and dealing with the Parks District insurance requirements. And I second some of the comments that had been made about how onerous that felt. Now, it wasn't actually onerous for my events because I have like an insurance person that I can text and like and they'll actually like answer. Like I can just text her like, hey, I need insurance this event. She's like, oh, well, that's covered under this or yada yada yada. But when I would be dealing with other people, that well, they don't have an insurance person that they have just on their phone that they can text constantly. And so some people even it got to the point where they just felt like, oh, the parks aren't even for me. Like, they require me to be having some kind of complex insurance agreement, and I don't even see how I could ever go about that. Clearly, the parks aren't even really in the public interest anymore. And it was difficult to kind of convince them. They're like, no, this wouldn't be that difficult. This wouldn't actually be that difficult to get you insurance. But it is like anything you've done before. Then I felt like the way that the Parks District handled the exception process. So this was mentioned about like the Parks District, you would just go to the board and you would ask them, they would co-sponsor your event. And usually they would end up waiving all of the requirements related to insurance. They would waive fees. They would waive all sorts of things. I actually felt like the leaning on that process all the time was extremely harmful, in the sense that it made the default process of what the forms told you had to do onerous, and there was no point in fixing them, because how often does it really come up that somebody comes to us and actually uses the form? Usually people will end up approaching somebody involved with the district and they'll say, oh, why don't you just come to the board next week and we'll get it approved by the district, we'll do co-sponsoring and we'll deal with this. And so I think that then that got compounded by the people who then saw that form and said, well, I'm not even going to bother talking to the Parks District because the form's on the website and it looks like I can't do any of this stuff. And so they just never even got to see all the people who weren't able to do things. The Parks District fixed this recently. The Parks District thought through the ideas of insurance, and they now have a process in place for helping you get insurance. This is something that I ended up seeing other cities in California have, where you can actually get insurance through the city, where you just like, instead of having to go get external insurance, you could just go to that city and as part of your form process, you would fill out something and say, and here's an additional $25 on my fee. And that will cover the insurance that you will automatically get on the back end. I do not know off the top of my head, and I should have checked. I do not know what the because I knew we were talking about this today, and somehow it just didn't occur to me to what the Parks District ended up concluding on that. I was at that meeting. I was bringing up these points, but I don't remember what they said. Yeah, I think it's important to try to make it so that the process for people to get access to the space feels streamlined and easy from the perspective of that default, how anyone who shows up to the website thinks, well, here's how I can get access to it. Okay, I see how to get access to it. I also appreciate the comment that Mark made about limiting recurrent uses that end up booking ahead of time and booking in depth. I think that we actually had though a process with the it was a couple years ago now with relation to our space. There was like if you were trying to do a recurring use, then you would get rate limited on your recurring use. But if you had a more sporadic use, then I guess you might be filling in spaces that other people wouldn't be taking. That we had something that worked well there. I also think that that's the kind of nuanced discussion that should probably go to our advisory committee. That I know now a lot of people who are on the advisory committee aren't even on the advisory committee anymore because they're not. Everyone, the community's changed so much in the last couple of years. But I do think that it would be good to, when we get our person, I may as well wait until then, really coordinate on getting that advisory committee together. So that's also not something that Jonathan has to spend a lot of time doing, in order to then be able to bring all those decisions well to them and actually listen to them in some sense. I have heard feedback before that was kind of felt like, oh, we would have a bunch of discussion there and then we would just do a quick decision here because we didn't end up having time to process all that feedback or the discussion, or we had something quick to do, which honestly is kind of what we're doing today. Again, we had something quick that we had to make a decision on. We didn't bring it to that committee. I think we should really try to bring that committee up to a level of like, this is really where things go through. And then, but we're here. We may as well. I think what Jonathan's on a good track as far as what his kind of like, I don't know if you call them recommendations, but his leanings in this document with respect to the limitations and yeah, whatever is easy for you, Jonathan, that's where I'm going to go.
Thank you for that, Director Freeman. Other input from directors? Director Bertrand.
Yes, thank you. Well, first off, I really appreciate the public comment on this item. I think folks had a lot of great ideas to share. I'm definitely concerned about making sure that we are not cost prohibitive for community events. I do recognize that $350 amount could be high if it was for many of the organizations that we usually work with, and I recognize that that's not the intent. And I think we're moving in the direction, as has been discussed, about having some sort of different structure that makes sure that folks who are community members are able to access the space easily, and for perhaps some outside uses that benefit IV residents, maybe there's some charge that goes along with that. I'm sure we'll figure that out, but I think our intent is definitely to make this accessible. I'm supportive of any efforts we can do to streamline the insurance process, and also cognizant of the staffing limitations right now, and definitely want to make sure that we do a good job on what we can do, but that we scale up as we move forward, but really pay attention to what our resources are. So I'm supportive of the direction that many of the folks before have already outlined.
Thank you, Director Bertrand. Any other input from directors? I think I see Director Topliff trying to unmute. Go ahead, Director Topliff.
Yes, trying to unmute. Well, we didn't talk specifically about COVID, and it does make sense to me that we would ask for proof of vaccination. That's all.
Thank you for that, Director Topliff. I'll just add my agreement to that. Director Deschler.
Yeah, we also, I agree too. We also didn't mention anything about Halloween. I love the idea of the community center, if it's needed by our first responders, to use that facility in a way that supports other first response efforts in the community on Halloween. I think that's just a great use, and it's such a good location. So I don't think we talked about that, so I just want to weigh in on that as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Director Deschler. Yeah, and so I think we'd like to see coming back on making a decision for our temporary policies is a matrix that includes fees, insurance, and deposit levels for the different groups, including residents, non-residents, residents and non-residents, and then I think I heard commercial groups as well, with the added layer of intensity of use. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Staff looking use, does that sound like something that is digestible and able to be conjured?
There was a question in the chat from Mark.
Great question, Mark, about a vaccine requirement. I'll just say how I'm envisioning it is I recognize that among the many things that we need to get figured out in terms of just allowing for people to use the space in the first place, that there will be a significant amount of time associated with a verification system, and I am supportive of building a verification system, but I'm also supportive of staff choosing how to prioritize these things. I think it's important that even from the get-go, we do establish a very clear expectation that there is a mandate, even if we are still figuring out the verification system. Any other comments from directors on that or other things mentioned? Excellent. Well, I also really want to thank the public. I think your engagement and input is really important, especially in this phase as we're developing initial policies, and then eventually we'll be adjusting them once we get through the experimentation phase. And I encourage your continued engagement, and hopefully as we all become users of the space, we'll learn even more and be able to make adjustments where it's necessary. I'm just so thankful to staff for all the work that you are doing to make the reservation and the use of this space a reality. It's been such a long time coming, and this is really one of the services that the community services district will provide that is it is integral to the purpose for why our district was formed, and it is integral to our mission to build a safer and healthier community. Just much love to staff for all the work that you are doing to make this possible. I'm also thankful to my colleagues for, I think, a really productive discussion tonight about these very complex issues about how do we ensure equitable access for all in our community. I think this was a really good discussion. Any other comments from board members? All right, seeing none. Do we need a motion on this item?
I think we don't really. I even put the recommendation is to direct me to start finalizing all this stuff. So that's, if you want to make that the motion, you can, or it's just, we got the direction and we know what we need to create based on your input.
Excellent. So I think maybe just a motion to direct staff to bring back to the board a set of proposed agreements, policies, and procedures for the period of October 2021 to December 2021. And I see a hand from Director Topliff.
To make that motion.
All right. Any second on this motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Flaherty. Is there any public comment on the motion? All right, seeing no, oh, I do see one. Gina, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was wondering if this would mean that in terms of Halloween, that this could be potentially finalized before then, or that this would likely be pushed to after Halloween. I'm just curious as to what y'all think based on the conversation today.
I think we will have some things done by the next board meeting. I was thinking what we bring back, the interim stuff will be very simple because we're going to try to keep it light and judgment based, and not that many events. And then we'll have a framework for what the larger one will look like that the advisory board will flesh out way more. But this interim one, I hope to get it done by the next meeting, and it should be really simple because we're not trying to go that complex right now and keeping the reservations conservative.
Thank you for that. Any other comments from members of the public? Okay, with that, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director Bertrand?
Yes.
Director Flaherty?
Yes.
Director Aguilar?
Yes.
Director Freeman?
Yes.
Director Deschler?
Yes.
Director Topliff?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thanks everyone for your input on that. I'm going to go ahead and take a 5-minute recess. We will be back at 7:50 p.m. Thanks everyone. All right. Hi, everyone. I'd like to reconvene this meeting. All right. We are going to move now to our last action item, which is requests for proposals for the Isla Vista parking study. And I want to thank, first off, our board members that are on the committee that helped formulate this RFP, and ask if they have anything that they want to provide before we do the staff presentation. Director Freeman, go ahead.
One thing that might be notable is that Jonathan even actually included a link to it apparently at the bottom of the set of appendices. Pacific Grove Parking Study 2012, and then the Coastal Commission report. These are things that when the Coastal Commission had been going over the Sanover County parking permit program and rejected it, I noticed that there was around this same time there had been a similar years later, but there had been another parking study for Pacific Grove and a request for parking permit program there, and the information that had been gathered by the Pacific Grove study and the presentation they'd put together really made the case obvious for why the parking permit program would directly target the people that should be affected and would not affect the people who should not be affected. And it went through and it showed not just there's a parking problem, not just during there's a certain percentage of spaces that are available or what the costs are, but it went through and it essentially did like exit surveys on people leaving their vehicles in order to determine, like they actually had like a photograph of like on this street, here are people who are parked for the local the aquarium that's there. Its name is not coming to me. And then here are people who are docents there, and then here are the hours that they need to be there parked, and then like these like lists of like showing that like, well, if we were to have a parking permit program that went into effect at this time for this many hours, it would clearly then affect this set of users, which would free up this many spots, which would solve our problem, as opposed to merely saying that like, okay, well, we have a problem and we've got some goals and here's some ideas. I think to the extent to which when we work on our parking RFP and our parking study, that we should strive to obtain information of a similar nature such that it is something that will be able to stand the interrogation of Coastal Commission of like, are you sure that's not going to affect somebody who came here to surf? Are you sure that's not going to affect the people who are passing through? Are you sure that that is a narrow effect? Like just being able to do that. And so we talked about this during the committee meetings, and then Jonathan incorporated this kind of information in the scope.
Thank you for that, Director Freeman. I see a hand too from Director Deschler.
Yeah, I was my little lab Lucy just walked in. Hi, Lucy. I just was going to say that so we had a really great meeting the other day, Marcos, Jay, I, and Jonathan. And I think what's significant about I hate to say Ivy parking study, because we've heard Ivy parking study so many times for so many years. And I did vote to have create a different name, but we couldn't think of anything else that really conveyed what this is, which is a parking study. But I think the significant thing when you look at this proposal is that this may be the first time, or one of the only times, maybe, I don't know, that the people who represent the community of Isla Vista are actually creating a study to understand the parking and environmental impacts of an overparked community. And I think that's really significant. There's been many parking studies over the past done by various different entities, but not done by the people who represent the community on this board. So I think it's significant, and we'll see what it produces.
Thank you, Director Deschler. So I'll hand it over to staff now to go through the RFP and scope of work.
All right. I'm going to go through the scope of work first, because that's the fun part. That's what we're going to do. So here's the scope of services. You might notice that the community introduction is pretty much the same as the STEP grant one, with some corrections made to it. But here's the main part. Here's what we really met on Friday to really discuss and get specific, which is the project overview and primary objectives of the study. And like Director Deschler said, this is the first one where we actually have Isla Vista residents, locally driving it, and it's going to be comprehensive. I think the major part of this, again, like Director Freeman said, is it's going to be taking into account qualitative and quantitative data, which the past that has not been done. And then it's going to propose to us different solutions that fall in line with our goals. And that's something I think our committee really gravitated around was, we of course are doing a parking study, and we have to do a parking study if we wanted to even do anything on parking. We know parking is an issue for many people, but what are we trying to solve? What are we trying to accomplish here? And it was safety and environmental protection was what our committee said. I thought that, that was a great thing to come up with, that sentence alone, that this parking study is about safety and environmental protection. And those are the values we're holding in putting this together and why we're doing it. So I think that's really important outcome from our meeting. And we really went into all the different kinds of things you want to understand. They're kind of highlighted here, from the very specific kinds of data to user interviews to the law and how the law interacts, the Coastal Act versus parking district. And also at the same time, making sure that all our different populations in Isla Vista are represented and none are overshadowing others, especially looking at families in Isla Vista and their needs. So that's the objective, is safety and environmental protection, looking at all the stakeholders, being comprehensive with the data, qualitative and quantitative. And I think it's a very strong project overview and objective that our committee came up with. The period of performance is pretty much this next month through the end of 2023. I put possible. I think it's every day in my head working on the STEP grant looks like, we might as well push through December 2023, just in case we want to get the fall data captured in it, which we won't be able to this time. Project deliverables, we went over this last time. We didn't change them, but they're gonna support us in some things, like creating a survey and doing community engagement, but consultant will do a lot of the heavy lifting on conducting the inventory of all the public and private parking spaces, which again, another thing that's never been done before. Only the street parking has been counted previously. Doing the existing conditions report and needs assessment. Proposing other data points. We went over and made a lot of different kinds of data points that we might want to measure, and we'd like to see what the consultant can also propose. And then finally, they will have a draft set of policy options to meet our challenges and objectives, which are safety and environmental protection. And so they will take the reality, and they'll take our goals and the needs in the community, and they'll make proposals for us, and they'll be draft, and we get to revise them and talk to them, and the community will get input before there's a mini final version. And even then, it's just the recommendations that we can choose to implement on our time schedule. And that's something we put in here too, is we would want to do this. I think it's not in this section, it's down here, but we would want to do this on a schedule. We might not be able to do everything all at once, but what our capacity can grow into in the recommendations. Some of the data we're looking at collecting, I'm not going to go through all of these, but how many parking spots exist? How many people live here? How many have cars? Why do they have a car? What are the uses for the car? How many people live in their car? How many cars is that? What's the density there? Here's an interesting one. Director Aguilar brought up is the blind corners on the street from cars taking up red curb. How many are taken by parking right now, and how many do we need to have strong safety and viewpoints? So that's delivery trucks, which have been really impacted this year, and their parking needs. So it's a really comprehensive, and if anyone has more, this is not an exhaustive list. As the proposal moves on, we can make sure this list is as exhaustive as possible, but we felt this captured almost everything. And then this is the legal analysis. I think we've included it before, but it's again just our legal standing for taking on the parking issue and making sure that the consultant is fully aware of where we're at as an organization, and then the status quo, which is County Public Works governs parking right now. For example, we were talking to the co-op, they wanted to change their parking in front of their building on the street. Go through Public Works for that right now, and the Foot Patrol is enforcing. They've got a parking enforcement officer, one person. Sometimes the Highway Patrol has been involved, but it's Isla Vista Foot Patrol right now doing car-to-car enforcement. So and then we did choose to make a citation. I think this was important. We didn't really have that in the STEP grant, but the relevant documents I thought was important to include here. Isla Vista Master Plan parking section, the parking study that we did not accept in the community at the time. Coastal Commission report on parking from 2006. That's the nexus point that started all this. Pacific Grove parking study, infamous, brought up a lot, and then our RFP for STEP grant. We want to make sure that both studies are, I'm losing the word, they're working together well. So that is the proposal. In terms of the rest of the RFP and how we're, here's one last point I want to note. Sorry, I'm scrolling very fast. In the price proposal, instead of saying, okay, we've got 25,000 budgeted, what is your proposal for how this fits in? We did leave it open. It will be, if they submit to us, we're going to do it for 90,000, and that's something we want to accept, we'll keep it to 90,000. It'll be a firm price that, but we left it open here to see what they propose, to see what's available, what can be done. And then, we'll have to review and see what we want to have done and what can we financially afford. So, but this is the breakdown we propose is, how much will for the existing conditions report and the needs assessment, and then for the recommendations that are made. And so in terms of our proposal, it's a 1 month RFP here. It's going to be open from tomorrow through November 15th. And we hope to make a selection in December. And our ad hoc committee will review, and we discussed, can we invite others who are experts to help us review submissions to make a recommendation to the board on a contract to enter into. But the RFP is pretty standard. Besides that, similar to what we did with the STEP grant in terms of the deadlines, the time, the length of time, and then what the proposer has to submit in terms of their work plan, their experience, their resumes, and their why they want to have this contract. So we kept those all the same because we felt all of those worked pretty well, and we got what we needed to know from the STEP grant. And that's the RFP. It's very exciting. It's again another one of those things that it's our district's unique power to do this, and it's been a long time coming.
Thank you for the presentation, Jonathan. I'll open it up for questions from members of the board. Director Freeman.
This is something I certainly should have asked when we had our, assuming this was actually in the document this time, but when we had our committee meeting, but I didn't notice at the time. There's in the actual contract, there is a clause that I'm very curious about the meaning of because when I read it, it says any and all documents, including draft documents where completed documents are unavailable, or materials presented or caused to be prepared by consultant pursuant to this agreement, shall be the property of consultant and shall not be disclosed by district unless required by law or valid court order. And it just
Yeah, we can fix that. This is our standard professional services agreement contract that we've used dozens of times, and it maybe works in other instances, but we can change that there and talk to them.
Yeah, well, so if we're, for example, like maybe I don't remember what previous cases was in, but like if we were having somebody come in order to just do some administration work, maybe then it would make sense. I'm not certain. Like, do you know the example when we've used this in the past? Or?
We use this on almost all our programs. Like Isla Vista Beautiful uses this.
Well, so for something like Isla Vista Beautiful, that makes sense to me because the goal of the service is not to construct a document. Whereas in this case, the goal of the service is that they will construct a document. And then the contract says that ownership of that document shall not be given to the district. And so it just seemed a little
good. No, good catch. We'll make that change before we execute. This is just an example here. So before we have a final contract, we'll bring it to the board. That's a good catch.
Thank you, Director Freeman. Any other questions from board members? All right, well, seeing none, I think it's a good time to go to the public for public comment. If you have a comment, please hit the raise hand button or put something in the chat. I see a hand raised from Mark Vukovic. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things I didn't get a chance to look at the document too closely, but I think I mentioned it another time in public comment, is to see how many times vehicles have been damaged in Isla Vista, specifically like mirrors being destroyed or damaged by passerbys, vehicles getting stolen, any sort of, it just feels like based on free and for sale. Seems like a lot of vehicles get damaged in Isla Vista, and I think that would be great data to collect as well if we're already doing this parking study. And then kind of on the more quantitative end, I think we could get like a lot of data and extrapolate a lot of data from that, like extrapolate meaning and extrapolate, like making some inferences from that data. But I think I would love for this parking study to be as explicit as asking the question, what would it take, in kind of the positive way, what would it take for, citizen X to not bring your car into Isla Vista or to not have a car in Isla Vista? Would it take having a robust bus service? Would it take having, food delivery services, the fee paid for? What, would it take, whatever? Or on the negative end, like would it take, being very expensive to drive in Isla Vista or to operate a car in Isla Vista? Like I think being that explicit about what would it take to not have a car in Isla Vista, to see what we can do, what the district can do as a service on the positive or negative end to, basically think have people not bring cars in Isla Vista to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, Mark. And I see a comment from Abby in the chat about wanting people who live in their cars to have their rights prioritized. You're welcome to elaborate on that if you want. Otherwise, your comment is well taken. Thank you. Are there any other public comments? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for any discussion. Director Freeman, go ahead.
I will say that in the what section is this? Project deliverable section, we did specifically ask about people living in their cars, community cars density. And part of the reason why was that during some of the discussion about this 6 years ago that I'd been kind of spearheading as far as the AB3 subcommittee on parking. When we brought back, I will own the fact that we did not prioritize that. We didn't even really occur to us to think about that category of user. And then we brought that back to the main AB3 meeting. We actually had something that we had buy-in from a number of groups, and it got hit hard and very immediately on, well, what about, it was two groups, undocumented people and people who are living in their cars. And so that's something that is constantly that I'm thinking of when we have these, and it is in the look at this product deliverables as far as the study, as far as the policy decision that would later come from whatever that study is something that I will be taking into deep consideration, and I hope other people on the board do. But it is something that the information required to make that decision is being requested in the study.
Thank you for that comment, Director Freeman. I'll add to some comments and just say a big thank you to staff and for our committee for putting this proposal together. I think this is a very important step for our district. When I first came to Isla Vista and got involved in the movement to create more self-governance for our community, one of the first topics that I became very engaged upon and interested in was the conversations happening about parking. And this was happening back in 2015. And I remember very vividly that there was strong consensus among the community that what we needed in order to understand this problem was a study that was done by the community and for the community, and a study that not only asked the question, how many cars are there in Isla Vista, but asked the deeper questions about why. Why do people have cars in Isla Vista? Why do people, what do people use their cars for? What sorts of trips are they taking? What types of users are they? And that qualitative component is exactly what we're considering today. And I think it's such an important step and something that is not something that local governments always prioritize when trying to solve problems. Usually there's a public outreach process, but this is more than a public outreach process. This is a data gathering process that is not just about numbers. It's about people, and it's about people's lived experiences. And I think that that's so crucial for us grappling with the challenges of this. And I want to add or propose another value to be added because I think that the values of safety and environmental protection for our policy is really, really an excellent set of goals. And I think that we should really add equity as well. I really appreciate the comments about those who are living in their vehicles and needing to find solutions that work for them, as well as I think about those in our community that use their vehicles for occupational purposes because it's connected with a business that they own, or some other line of work that they perform in order to support their family. And I think really diving deep into those issues from an equity lens is so important as we grapple with this challenge. I'll add one more thing. The strength of this study is not just the fact that it's by and for the people of Isla Vista, but that it is going to be done in regional cooperation. And I think that that is so crucial for our success. I think that we are even much better positioned now to be able to embark upon this study because for the first time in a long time, Santa Barbara also has representation on the Coastal Commission, which is going to be very crucial towards the implementation of anything related to parking in Isla Vista. And so I really hope that we can engage with our representative on the Coastal Commission from Santa Barbara. And I hope that we can also find a way to engage with groups that have shown interest in engaging in these issues in the past. I know that groups that are organized around beach access will be very interested, and I anticipate that that will be a group as well. But also, as I mentioned, crucially UCSB, and I think there could be a role for Santa Barbara City College as well. So I'm very excited about the direction that this is headed. And I am just very much appreciative of everyone who put a lot of thought into producing this document, because I think it's very detailed and I think it sets us up for success. Any other comments from board members? Hand from Director Freeman.
I will say that I really appreciated. I got distracted for a moment because of the thinking about the issue of the people leaving their cars, and I forgot to go back. Also, I really appreciated Mark's comment about kind of directing a focus on what is needed by the different groups in order to make it so that they have less reliance on cars, as because it kind of also reframes the discussion of how to deal with the parking issue from the default of, oh, well, we'll have a permit program, or we'll have or build lots, to how do we figure out how to displace the need for parking. I know, for what it's worth, the university certainly has spent time thinking about this issue and has tried to work on figuring out how to make it so that people feel that don't have much need for a car. I'm not saying this is a unique thought process, but I think it is something that I don't know if it's something. Maybe should the study do that? Should we offload that to the consultants to have them think about what are the goals of the people using their cars that could be displaced? Or should we merely determine who are using cars, and then at our board, as a policy thought, try to figure out how to use that information to displace the use of cars? I'm curious what people's thoughts on that.
Jonathan, can you describe the division of labor between the qualitative and quantitative components? I think that we'll get to Director Freeman's question.
No, I actually think it's separate. It's the STEP grant will look at a lot of mobility needs for people and where they need to go and what is missing mobility wise for them to use clean mobility options, and that's why these two are going to go really well together. It's even said here, determine destination by category may be answered in STEP grant. So I think, yeah, we do want to do, that's why we are doing a parking study and a community mobility plan at the same time. And because one will help determine what are the gaps in our network, and the other will, give us all the information needed on parking. And you couldn't finish the STEP grant without finishing the parking study, and vice versa. But yeah, in terms of the quantitative, qualitative, like we will help go get all the surveys out. That'll be our job, but the consultant will review that data, like the responses, and to our liking, and they will do the existing conditions of like counting spots and categorizing things and all that.
I think we also put in our document that we are asking for policy recommendations from.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
A draft and final set, so we can propose the draft, and then people don't like them, we can change them.
Excellent. Thank you for explaining that. I think that's really helpful. Are there any other questions from board members or comments, anything about this? All right, seeing none. Any other comments from members of the public? Can't tell if that's a hand from Mark or if that's a leftover hand.
Leftover hand.
Okay, cool. Then with that, I think we're ready to entertain a motion to approve this item.
I'll make that motion. Topliff.
Made by Topliff. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Deschler. All right, with that, I think if there's no other comment, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Great. Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director Flaherty?
Yes.
Bertrand?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes.
Deschler?
Yes.
Topliff?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thank you, everyone, and just a big thanks again to our committee for helping put this together. I'm very excited for what this will bring. We're now going to move to reports. First, reports from members of the board. Anyone have anything they'd like to share? Director Freeman, go ahead.
This is I think that this is it feels like this is the essentially I'm just like forwarding a hearsay rumor, but this is something that I wanted to mention to people on the board, but I then felt like, well, I shouldn't be emailing or something behind the scene people on the board. My understanding is that Ed St. George purchased the Ivy Market building, but that was something that I heard from Henry Saria, and for all I know, he's wrong. So, but just FYI, people think that Ed St. George purchased the Ivy Market building.
Thank you for sharing that, Director Freeman. Any other reports from board members? Director Bertrand.
Thank you. And I guess this kind of falls under board member report or committee report, but I'll say it here. Me and Marcus tabled at the Isla Vista Food Co-op last Friday about the nightlife planning process, and it went really well. We had a lot of great conversations. We reached about 35 people, and a lot of folks had really good ideas and were excited about what we were doing. So that's just the first of a series of outreach events, but it was a good start.
Yeah, I want to just add, I had the tally was 34 people exactly. And the top topics, we had a lot of good conversation with residents or visitors. It didn't really matter exactly who they were, but the top comments were about music, increasing music, making music louder, giving more opportunities to dance, more opportunities for people to jam together, different things like that. Some of my favorite ideas that I heard were a 24-hour diner or more 24-hour food options for people. People mentioned having arts walk type of business interaction with the community, which I know is something that I think that, UCSB is pretty interested in, that I hear about from my role over there. People mentioned wanting to have unmanned hydration stations, so they didn't feel as judged per se, or nervous in front of people with uniforms. And then also there was a direct mention of creating block parties, and if we could do anything to close down streets for these said block parties, which we luckily do have some powers behind us to make that happen. So lots of exciting conversations.
Thank you for that report, Director Aguilar. Director Flaherty.
Yes, directly related to that, I will be tabling tomorrow and Friday. Tomorrow will be at St. George Youth Center, and then Friday will be at Window to the Sea. And so I'm really excited to talk to people. I think it'll be a great opportunity to reach a lot of different parts of our community. Hopefully air quality is good so that we can be doing that and everything, but I'm excited to be there and reach different pockets of our community.
Thank you for that update, Director Flaherty. I'll just share a tidbit from last week. I was very happy to attend, along with many of you, the opening of the Isla Vista mobile book van that is being organized by the Goleta Valley Library System. And just want to say thank you, because I know Director Freeman and Director Aguilar served us well as board members on the advisory board and helped make this happen. And just a big thank you to all of our elected partners, Senator Monique Lamone, Mayor Paul Perotti, Supervisor Hartman, and more for being there in attendance. It was a really great event, and very nice to see the van in action. So that's my report. Any reports from standing and ad hoc committees? I don't think we have any. I think we've got some committee reports on our agenda items tonight, which is great. So we'll move to a report from District Council.
Thank you, President Brandt. Just a quick 2 points. The legislative session is over, and the governor has signed all the bills that he is going to sign. The October 10th was the last date for him to sign or veto, and if he doesn't veto, then it automatically becomes law. So I won't have any more reports until January when the next legislative session gets going. The other point is I've mentioned in the past, not sure when it was, but relatively recently, that my firm, Alisher and Winder, has been investing in a commitment to the communities that we serve. We've been doing that from the very start since we incorporated when organized in 2003. But most recently, that's taken the form of we have internally created a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. I'm lucky enough to be a part of that committee. It's been extremely informative, and in some aspects, at least for me personally, life-changing, which I think is pretty rare to say. The committee work can be so life-changing, but it's something I bring up because we, as a committee, put together a paper on diversity, equity, inclusion for presentation at the Cal Cities, the League of California Cities annual conference in September. It was very well received, and our paper is actually being requested to be disseminated to other public agencies for them to look at with the use of their staff. And it really hit, I think, a nerve that demonstrates that the issues embodied by DEI are really transcending some of the boundaries that you might normally think have been in place there to separate people from gaining knowledge on those topics and those issues. But I think I just want to point out that it's part of our continuing commitment to make sure that we are reflective of and respecting the values of the communities that we serve. And that, for me personally, it was a very powerful group, and the involvement has been impactful in a way that I think lets us use the law to construct policies in a way that really is reflective of, I think someone said earlier, the values of our clients, and to best support them consistent with our goal also as attorneys, and our job is to serve the public. So just I guess a semi-personal anecdote that might be relevant, in particular to this board that is so good about taking those issues, incorporating it into the policy decisions, that can be adapted and adopted to increase the change that we are putting out into the world as well. So it's an ongoing process. We look forward to continuing it. And thanks for the opportunity to share on it.
Thank you, Russ, for that report. And thank you for the work that your firm is doing. That all sounds, incredibly important, especially given the moment that we are in where this is much more spoken about and where it's time for action. So thank you for that. Now we're going to go to a report from General Manager.
Great. All right, so community engagement. I can't believe it's been 2 weeks since the last meeting, and in that 2 weeks, we launched the community calendar, a really exciting new service on our website. Anyone can submit their events if they're happening in or around the district to benefit district residents. And it's also the reservation system to start a reservation for the community center and community room. So multiple uses, it's simple. And it shows there are different locations in Isla Vista, what's going on all over the town. So it'll keep growing, and it's been started with our library services at the community center and other areas, and basic needs and food distribution. The regional entry points we already host, the safety stations are on there. So we got a lot of our basic stuff on there, and we're starting to add other events as we find them. And board members are encouraged to find things and send them in. It's a team effort, but the community calendar is going, and you're starting to work on getting it listed in other places. And it's a tool for us to use to grow our presence by becoming the central hub. But another thing that Sydney is working on, for example, is our social media operations are now really starting to normalize. For example, you might have seen on Instagram, there was a post today with our board meeting agenda, what's being discussed, a link to the Zoom link, just getting into that calendar of which posts are happening which day. So that's really good. And just a fun thing she's done is, we have a redistricting workshop at Ivcn this Thursday that affects Isla Vista. And so she got one of the commissioners to come to Ivcn and speak with people about redistricting. So a lot is going down. She couldn't be here today because she's leading a meeting of emerging leaders alumni this evening. So she wishes she could have been here, but she has that long-standing commitment. Compost Collective, we're sending out a press release soon on our new pile with St. Mike's. And now that we're stabilized, we're going to start looking at growth and scaling. But we really had to get that compost pile figured out to keep at our status quo. In terms of Isla Vista Beautiful, I had a good walk around with the CEO of United Way and the staff around Isla Vista, just to show more directly the different issues, the graffiti, the trash, just the different issues in the community, so that they're really well aware of it, because they mainly work in Santa Maria. And so they came up with a lot of different ideas on how we can restructure the program's rhythm and work and how it does things to meet the needs. One example, the trash area. Now we're going to dedicate an employee to trash, and it's going to be, every day will be trash pickup instead of the more random way it was done before. So now, I think 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., Monday through Friday, we have someone out there picking up trash, and we're measuring it differently now. It's before it used to be like how many trash requests, how many, clusters of trash did we find? That didn't really work. I'm not even sure how we started doing that. We're going to do it better now. He will collect all the trash at the end of his shift, weigh it, take a picture of all the bags, upload that as a single request into SeeClickFix of work that's been completed. And then there'll be the visual, all the bags full of trash, and the weight. The weight will be what we'll keep tracking. So that's one improvement. It's a major change. Sounds like a little thing, but I think we'll just do a better job here, just in trash at least, giving up trash. So yeah, we're still waiting on safety stations. We've got 2 locations, and we're working with IVRPD to get to the 3rd one still. No update on the interpersonal investigator, no update on mediation. The buildings, the community center and community resource building, we still have not been able to get a time for our facility assessment report between us and the county and the assessor. A lot of different schedules trying to get scheduled. So we're working on it. STEP grant, I'll say, continues to eat a lot of time. We did interview the applicants who submitted RFP proposals. We had 4 submissions. We had 2 finalists, and we're doing reference checks, and we'll bring one to approve at the board next time. We had planned to do it today, but our reference checks took longer than expected. Halloween, again, is another one, good amount of work the last couple of weeks, should be more, but we've got at least a structure to move forward on. Our audit, I think I mentioned it last time, it's now finally scheduled, end of the month. So that end of October is getting really busy. So our audit's coming soon, and our next RFP on the docket to get done is our planning one. So we had met, me and Spencer and Carrie, and now we've got to just get the RFP together now. It's the next one online. We did parking and STEP. Now it's time for this one. And then lastly, I'm applying to the COVID relief, $100 million that the state allocated. We have a lot that does fall in, but it is tricky. Some are obviously falling in. Some, I think they definitely should fall in for us, but might not be obvious for other agencies. We have some that Ross was really helpful. That his firm coded all the expenses for COVID, so it'll be easy to grab all those. So it's a bit of a project. I don't want to give a number, but I think we can request a few $1,000s at the close to $5 to $10. I don't want to jinx it or anything, but I think we can get into the $5,000 to $10,000 range, which I think is very small, and we might just get. And we have very clear, COVID information. Our door hangers, that's $2,000 each. Our food distribution at the beginning of COVID, I think, would count. That was like $2,000. So we'll see what we can make work. And then lastly, I've been working for 4 years now, so I just want to say it's my work anniversary officially. So crazy.
Lucky us.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on the work anniversary and for all of the incredible work that you're doing with us to this day. Any questions from board members on the GM's report? All right, excellent. Well, not seeing any. Our next meeting of the Board of Directors will take place on October 26th at 6 p.m. on Zoom and or in the community room. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Made by Topliff. Is there a second?
Carrie was fast tonight. I'm a second.
Seconded by Deschler. You two are getting a lot of motions and seconds tonight.
Yeah, let's move it along, huh?
Any public comment or discussion? All right, let's go roll call. Oh,
Oops, my bad. Brent,
yes.
Flaherty, Bertrand,
Yes.
Aguilar,
Yes.
Freeman, Deschler.
Yes.
Topliff.
Yeah.
All right, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.